Hello, this is Danny Raymond, the voice behind Ray's Guide, and this is the 5th video in a series explaining server meshing from the player's experience. In the first video, I explained client-side object container streaming, server-side object container streaming, and discussed the two main problems with the current system, which is absolute dispersal, which is mostly a server problem, and absolute concentration, which is mostly a client problem. And both of them are the reason why the 50 server player account exists, and which is what everybody is trying to get beyond. In the second video, I discussed shards, their history, what they do, the issues in persistence that they cause, and why we want as few of them as possible and still not be saddling 2/3 of the world with a lag disadvantage from being too far away from the data center. My estimate is that the equilibrium between those concerns will be 3 to 5 shards, each serving continent-sized regions. But to start with, we may have almost as many shards as we currently have servers. One of the main challenges in getting from having too many shards to just a handful will be getting the necessary performance out of the subject with the third video, the replication layer, which has the task of keeping everybody cross-informed about everybody else is doing and what they are seeing in the game world around them, and essentially acting as both your computers and the server's source of what I called the Big Book of Game Information, which is actually called the Entity Graph Database and the subject of the fourth video. Also something that will be needed to have high performance out of. So now we get to the thing which actually is meshed with server meshing, the dedicated game servers, or DGS, although I prefer to call them the distributed game servers. In previous videos, I described the game server as analogous to the game master in a pen and pencil RPG, in that they describe the setting to you, take in your actions, and adjudicate the results and tell them to you. Now, in the video on replication layer, I described how the task of describing the universe under server meshing was no longer the job of the game server, but of the replication layer, who also described the game setting to the game server at the same time it tells it to you. So let me address a side issue. What is the technical reason why server meshing is needed for Pyro? And the answer is, there really isn't a technical reason for why it is needed. You could just stretch OCS even further, except now you would have 50 players spread over 2-star systems, and the verse would be even rarer to see a fellow player by accident. So let's think about the coarsest of fixed server meshing, a server for Stanton and a server for Pyro. Okay, but now as soon as Pyro is launched, what percentage of the players are going to want to visit Pyro to check it out? Yeah, all of them. So you have one server still needing to service everybody, while the second one is nearly idle, at least for a few weeks or months at the start until things spread back between the two systems. So how much can you really increase the shard player count? Until they can reliably spread back between the two systems, not much at all. So let's try to go slightly less coarse in your fixed mesh, say 1 for each of the 4 planets in Stanton and the 10 planets of Pyro. We can expect a little better distribution of players among those servers, but what happens if a large criminal org all logs in at Ruin Station or a big commercial org all logs in at Loreville? So let's suppose instead you go whole hog to a fine-grained server mesh. Let's create one server for the Loreville CBD train station, and another for the lobby, and another for the transfers area, and another for the showcase area. And then let's apply that same degree of high granularity across all the planets, all the moons, and all the systems. Now, with the exception of when the players out of general mischief try to squeeze as many people into a room as possible just to see what happens, you can likely really start to up the shard player count. But it also means that you have literally many hundreds of servers that sit idle most of the time. And even though we are not talking about physical servers, but rather virtual servers on clustered hardware, there still is a charge from AWS for each server process you keep running, busy or not. So CIG in the CitizenCon presentation made it clear that they were going to keep the static server mesh fairly coarse during the static server meshing phase while they work on the handoff process and the splitting and merging process that will allow them to have the mesh be finer grained when they need it and to be coarse grained when it is sparsely occupied, the dynamic server mesh. But let's look at the process of moving you from one server in the process to another. And for this, I need a 1-second clip from the movie Sully.
Aircraft.
This is how, in real world, a pilot and co-pilot ensure that one and only one of them is pushing on the yoke and pedals. It is one of the very first things that a flight instructor will cover with a student pilot before they ever take to the air together. So let's say we're at Loreville train station and the fine-grained server mesh that I described earlier. You start running towards the lobby, and after you cross some point, let's say here, the replication layer adds the lobby server to the destination for information about you. But even though both servers are getting information about you, the train station server is the only one the replication layer will accept information about what you are doing and what is happening to you. Then at some point going up the stairs, the lobby server is handed the role of being authoritative about my character. Then probably when I reach the top of the steps, the replication layer will remove the train station server from the list of destinations for information about you. You turn towards the transfer office, and as you enter the hallway, the replication server would add the transfers office server to the list of destinations about your character, and then somewhere along the way, the transfer office server is given authority over you. This is why it can happen completely seamlessly for the player. It is simply a transfer of authority between the two servers that already know all about them. But it has to happen fast, both the loading of the data and the transfer of authority, which adds to the expectation that the main components of a shard will all have to be co-located in the same facility. Hopefully that gives you a notion of how your character is going to be able to be passed from one DGS to another behind your back. But how do you go from there to making the mesh dynamic? By dynamic, I mean the system can decide to go from a situation where the entire Lorville CBD is covered by one server to one where there is a separate server for each room if things get busier, and then go back to having just one server for the entire Lorville CBD when things get less busy. And it will only be when that is possible that CIG will really be able to open up the shard player count. The hint at both processes can be found in this item from the work assignment tracker, DGS Crash Recovery. When a dedicated game server DGS crashes, this system will spin up a replacement DGS and restore its state from the replication layer. While the description says it will spin up a new DGS system, designers will usually instead, for performance reasons, have a small pool of reserve DGS systems like players on a bench on a sports team. And while the description of the item is for crash recovery, and it will be excellent at that, once they have the ability to be done for crash recovery, they can leverage that same code to do merging and splitting. Because what DGS Crash Recovery is essentially doing is giving a new dedicated server the same territory as all or part of an existing dedicated game server, have the replication fill it with the same people and things, and then switch authority of all the players to the new one, and then getting rid of the old one. But what if instead of duplicating and destroying a server because it was crashed, you do it because the original server has a territory that has become too crowded or too sparse? So let's take the example of splitting. Let's say right now the train station and the lobby at the Lorville CBD are on the same DGS, but it's getting a bit overcrowded. So the shard creates two new servers, one for the train station and one for the lobby. Then both of them get filled from the replication layer, so that after just a moment, I'm here and my information is being given to both the new train station only and the old train station plus lobby DGS. And then, with no change to me, authority is switched to the new server, and as soon as that is done for everybody, the old server is cleared and returned to the idle pool. Merging is exactly the same thing in reverse. Things have become less crowded, so a new server is taken from the idle pool and given the territory of both the train station and the lobby. The replication populates the new server with information about both territories, and then when it is ready, authority for each of the characters is switched over to it, and then completed, the old servers are cleared back to the idle pool. So now with merging and splitting, we have reached the full scope of dynamic server meshing, and the player shard limits can be relaxed to the point where we can have those 3 to 5 huge regional shards. But have they? There are still 2 big issues, but they are not issues for the network team. They are world design and game client issues, and they will be the subject of the final video in this series. But first, a word on the Grow the Channel Ship giveaway. As of recording, we are at half of the subscriber goal and a third of the member goal to release to somebody their choice of the Anvil Liberator shipping ship for shipping your ships, or the Misk Odyssey Long Duration Exploration Carrier. 1 entry per video. Members, you're entered automatically, and if the winner is a member, as of the publication, the winning video, they will win both the Liberator and the Odyssey. For non-members, just be a subscriber and comment somehow using the secret word. And the secret word for this video is the name of the movie that I used a clip from to illustrate transfer of authority. Fly safe, keep it real, and I'll see you in the verse. This is Daniel Raymond for Ray's Guide.